There was only one part of the lock-in that Chris dreaded. The more he thought about it, the more nervous he became at the prospect of pulling out one of his own teeth. Chris had always been squeamish about dental matters. When he was little and had a loose baby tooth, he would procrastinate pulling it until the tooth hung by the smallest of threads. Sometimes, if he was lucky, the tooth would just come out without him even having to touch it. He lost one in an apple once, another in an ear of corn. Another time, when he had one tooth that had been letting hang on for a number of weeks. His dad asked to see it, then yanked it out without warning. Chris had been mad at him for days. Then there was the matter of dental visits. Even if it was just an exam and a cleaning, Chris was consumed with anxiety for weeks before. His mother told him she loathed his trips to the dentist as much as he did, because she was the one who had to get him there, and put up with his moaning and groaning before, during, and after. Chris lay awake all night thinking. The lock-in was 2 nights away. If he could just figure out a way to participate in the experiment without having to pull out his own tooth. "Chris, your friends are at the door," his mom called. Again? Chris thought. It showed how much less serious Josh and Kyle were that they show up and want to hang out on a school night. "Tell them I have homework," Chris yelled. "Come tell them yourself," his mom yelled back. Chris rolled his eyes, but got up from the bed. He went to the door to see Josh and Kyle. "Hey," he said. "I can't hang out tonight. I've got homework." "We just stopped by for a sec," Josh said. "Kyle's mom is going to drive us to the mall on Friday. We're going to eat at the food court and see the new Revengers movie. We wondered if you wanted to come." It was kind of them to ask, but their pastimes seemed so childish now. "Thanks, guys. I'd love to. But I've got the science club lock-in that night." "Oh, you're doing that?" Kyle said, sounding incredulous. "It seems kind of sad you spend most of the weekend in school." "Well, I think it's exciting," Chris said. Kyle and Josh exchanged a look. "Just don't get too deep into science club stuff, okay?" Josh said, "Some people in Mrs. Harrison's class were talking about it yesterday. They say it's weird, like a cult or something." Chris couldn't help but be offended. Josh and Kyle might not be cut out for science club themselves, but they could at least show it proper respect. "Well, people in science class talk about the people in Mrs. Harris's class, too," Chris said. "Yeah," Kyle said. "They say we're dumb." "Because they're snobs," Josh added. Kyle gave Chris a strange look. "You're not turning into a snob, are you, Chris?" "No, of course not," Chris said. He hated that word. Snob. It was what underachievers called high achievers, to try to make them feel better about themselves. Well, he refused to take the bait. "Do you think Josh and me are dumb?" Kyle asked. Chris cringed a little. "It's Josh and I," he thought reflexively. "And you're not dumb. You just lack maturity and ambition." But he figured it would be a bad idea to say either of those things out loud. "No, of course not," Chris said again. "Look, guys, I've got to get back to my homework. Maybe we can do something next Friday, okay?" They said sure and okay, but Chris could feel the distance between him and his old friends growing. It was a painful transition, but it was probably for the best. "Bye, guys," Chris said, and shut the door. In the living room, Chris's mom was leaning over Emma, who was sitting on the couch. "Count to 3 out loud before you do it, okay?" Emma said. "Before you do what?" Chris asked. His mom looked over at him. "Emma's got a loose tooth. I'm going to pull it out for her." Chris felt his stomach lurch. "Well, don't do it while I'm in here. You know that stuff grosses me out." Why couldn't his family tend to distasteful matters in private, instead of in the middle of the living room? It was just a sign of how unrefined they were. Mom laughed. "Wait till you're a parent. None of the stuff that grossed you out as a kid will bother you anymore." Chris shook his head. "I don't know about that. If I have a kid, he'll definitely have to pull his own loose teeth." Chris fled the scene of the tooth extraction and went to his room. As soon as he was alone, his thoughts turned to the science club lock-in. The idea hit him like a jolt of electricity. Loose tooth. Of course, that's the answer. Chris walked past Cool Beans Coffee, probably thousands of times, but he had never gone inside. For some reason, it just hadn't felt like it was for him. It was too sophisticated and adult, full of professionally dressed grown-ups, sitting with their laptops and cardboard cups. But today that was going to change. Chris was going inside. He swung the door open and was immediately greeted by the dark, toasty smell of coffee. Paintings by the local artist hung from the cafe's red brick walls. Chris had to tell himself not to be nervous. That from now on, this was the kind of place where he belonged. Hi, Chris. Sam waved at him, from where he, Malcolm, and Brooke were sitting. Their tables strewn with open textbooks, notebooks, and coffee cups. Get a drink and join us. Great, I will, Chris called back. He studied the menu board over the counter. It was more confusing than anything he had ever studied in class. There were mochas and frappes and cappuccinos and lattes. There were single shots and double shots and decaf and half-calf. Chris had never taken so much as a sip of coffee before, and he had no idea what any of these words meant. The pretty young woman at the counter said, "May I help you?" "Sure. I'm just not a very experienced coffee drinker, so I don't really know what I want." She smiled. "How about if I just make you something I think you'll like?" Chris was relieved to have the responsibility out of his hands. "Sure. Do you like chocolate?" "Of course. I'm not stupid." What kind of weirdo didn't like chocolate? Chris thought. She smiled again. "Let's try an iced mocha then. Give me just a couple of minutes." She turned her back on him and poured some different syrups in a machine. Chris couldn't decide if her action looked more like chemistry or wizardry. Shortly after, she returned with a huge clear plastic cup, filled with what appeared to be rich chocolate milk, topped with whipped cream and chocolate shavings. It looked like the world's fanciest milkshake. The price she quoted was $2 more than he expected, and he hoped his new friends didn't see him, having to dig through his pockets and his backpack for change. He took his expensive beverage and joined Sam, Malcolm, and Brooke at their table. They were all drinking hot coffee from paper cups, and compared to theirs, his milkshake-like drink looked childish. He had to admit, it was delicious, though. "So, it looks like we're going to France this winter again," Malcolm was saying. "I really wanted to do Italy, but my mom can't pass up the shopping in Paris. I'm going to be bored to tears. I think we're doing a Caribbean cruise this year. I guess it'll be okay," Sam said. He turned to Chris. "We were just talking about family vacations and how we never get any say in where we go." "Same here," Chris said. He hoped they didn't ask him about where his family had gone on vacation. Chris's family vacations were always the same. His parents took a week off in the middle of the summer, and they rented a cabin at a state park that was a couple of hours away. They spent the week fishing, swimming, hiking, and cooking out. It was always hot and buggy. For the most part, they had fun. But Chris knew it was the poor people's vacation. "Oh, that drink looks good," Brooke said, nodding toward his drink. "Is that a mocha?" "Yes," said Chris. He was going to have to study up on coffee lingo. His parents drank coffee, but just the kind you bought at the grocery store and made at home. "Mine is too," she said. "Just hot instead of iced." Chris felt less self-conscious about his drink now. "You need to loosen up around your new friends," he ordered himself. They had invited him to join them. They wanted him here. It was time for him to start acting like he belonged. "So what kind of results do you think the experiment at the lock-in will produce?" Sam asked, looking around the table. "Well, clearly we'll be growing some kind of tissue," Malcolm said, sipping his coffee. "I just don't know what it'll do." "It'll do something, though. That's for sure," Brooke said. "Hopefully nobody will end up in the emergency room like last year." Chris almost choked on his coffee. Wait, what? Brooke laughed. Some kid didn't follow the instructions right, and ended up having to have a couple of fingers reattached. It was his own fault, though. He ended up transferring to Mrs. Harris's science class, where he was less likely to maim himself. The experiments are perfectly safe if you know what you're doing, but that kid clearly didn't, Malcolm said. Speaking of knowing what we're doing, if we're calling ourselves a study group, we better get down to studying. Chris was usually already home when his mom came in from work, but today, she beat him there. There you are, she said when he came in. I signed your permission slip for the school thing. I was worried when I didn't see you here. I was just about to call and check on you. She was sitting on the couch with a glass of iced tea, her bare feet propped up on the coffee table. She didn't move, but extended a hand with the paper. I've joined a study group that meets after school, Chris said, pocketing the slip. His mom laughed. If some other kid told me that, I might think he was lying, so he could run around after school, doing who knows what. But I believe you. I know, I'm a nerd, Chris said, sitting beside his mom on the couch. I'm proud you're a nerd, she said, smiling. I was wondering, Chris said. Might it be possible for me to have a small increase in my allowance? Mom took her feet off the coffee table and sat up straighter. How much are we talking? Chris tried to calculate a figure that wasn't too outrageous, but would still cover the price of expensive coffee drinks at study group meetings. $10? Mom furrowed her brow and made a low whistling sound. And what do you need $10 more a week for? It's this study group, actually. We meet at Cool Beans downtown, and I need money for the coffee. Gotten hooked on the stuff already, his mom said, shaking her head. Listen, kid, those frou-frou coffee drinks are real money suckers. One gal I worked with used to buy one every day, and when she quit the stuff, she was amazed at how much money she saved. The fact that she was lecturing him was not promising. Why can't you guys study at the library? His mom asked. The library is free. Chris felt a wave of annoyance sweep over him. Mom, I didn't start the study group. I just joined it. Well, maybe you could suggest meeting in the library. I'm sure it would save everybody a lot of money. Chris rolled his eyes. If I suggest that, they'll think I'm poor, which I am compared to them. His mom sighed. If they're your friends, they don't care how much money you have, and you shouldn't care how much they have either. Mom, Chris said, on the verge of losing his temper. That's not the way the world works. She sighed. I know it's not. I wish it was, though. She looked at Chris with a sad little smile. Okay, I can give you $5 more a week, but that's all. I'm glad you're making friends who take school seriously. Study hard so you can get rich, and support me in my old age. Thanks, Mom, Chris said. This time, he didn't object when she gave him a hug. Chris was buzzing with excitement as he walked to Mr. Little's classroom after school on Friday. He knew the lock-in was going to be a transformative experience. Probably the most important experience in his life to date. He hoped he could complete the experiment to Mr. Little's satisfaction and gain his approval, as well as the approval of the other science club members. Chris wasn't the only student who was excited. As he entered the classroom, he could feel the high level of energy. It felt electric. Everybody was talking and laughing. Some people stood and paced instead of sitting at their desks, too restless to sit still. Chris took his usual seat behind San. San turned around and grinned at him. Your first lock-in. This is a big day for you, right? Yeah, Chris said, smiling back. It is for me, too, San said. But it's even bigger for you because it's your first time. After tonight, you'll be a full-fledged member of Science Club. All eyes on me, all mouths closed, Mr. Little called from the head of the classroom. I know you're excited. Heck, I'm excited too. But there are some very important directions you have to follow exactly, or the experiment won't work. He pushed his glasses up on his nose. I have also taken the liberty of ordering some pizzas, which should be here shortly. Cheers rose from all over the classroom. It's going to be a long night, and you should never conduct scientific research on an empty stomach. But while we wait for sustenance, allow me to explain more specifically what you'll be doing tonight. As you can see, I have set up private cubicles for each of you in the lab. In your cubicle, you will find a long table and a cot for napping. On the table, you will find a Freddy Fazbear Mad Scientist kit. There were a few chuckles in class, and one kid said, "But isn't that kit just a toy?" "It is most certainly not a toy," Mr. Little replied, his voice turning stern suddenly. "And if you treat it as one, it will be at your own peril." He held up the kit for everyone to see, and then opened it. In the kit, you will find a container of Fazgoo and a petri dish, like this. He held up a vial of pink glop and a small dish. You will empty the Fazgoo into the petri dish. Then comes the sacrifice. "The tooth," Chris half whispered. "Yes, the tooth," Mr. Little said, grinning wildly. "You will use the pliers." He held up a pair of pliers. "To extract the tooth of your choice. I would advise one near the back. When your wisdom teeth come in, you won't have to worry about crowding." Chris heard a sharp intake of breath from someone behind him. All of a sudden, his stomach felt queasy at the thought of the tooth extraction. He was glad he found out a way around it. "If you can't handle this part of the experiment, now is the time to leave." Mr. Little looked around the classroom. "It's time to separate the real scientists from the wannabes." Chris looked around the room. Some kids looked scared, but none of them moved. "Good," Mr. Little said, nodding in approval. "I like my students to be fully committed. After you have extracted the tooth, you will place it in the petri dish of Fazgoo. And that," he said, rubbing his hands together, "is when things start to get interesting. You see, the Fazgoo will not only make the tooth stay alive, it will make the tooth believe it is still a part of you." "A tooth can believe something?" Brooke asked. "Well, it can feel that it's still inside your mouth," Mr. Little said. "The Fazgoo is very powerful. When you touch it, it creates a tendril, a connection, that slowly pulls red blood cells from your body. The blood cells feed the Fazgoo and fuel the experiment. And here's the amazing part. Over the course of several hours, nourished by just a few of your red blood cells, the tooth will grow gums, will form a full mouth, and that mouth will open up and tell you something that I promise, no matter how old you live to be, you will never forget." Chris looked around at his classmates, all of whom were wearing an identical look of disbelief. "You'll see," Mr. Little said, looking around at all the stunned faces. "It will be amazing. Once the mouth has told you what you need to know, it will die. I have provided a biohazard bag in each cubicle. You will dispose of the mouth and the Fazgoo in the bag. After you have brought me the bag so I can dispose of it correctly, you are free to go." Mr. Little looked toward the classroom door and smiled. "But first, pizza." He waved for the delivery guy to come in. "You have 30 minutes to eat, drink, and socialize," Mr. Little said. "But after that, it's time to get to work." Chris grabbed a couple of cheese slices and a paper cup of soda and sat down with Sam, Brooke, and Malcolm. "I guess this is the last pizza I chew with my left back molar," Malcolm said. But he sounded more amused than scared. "I'm a little worried. Pulling one of my teeth will mess up my orthodontia," Brooke, who had a mouthful of braces, said. "Yeah, your orthodontist is going to be pretty mad," Sam said. "Will your parents be mad too, when they find out?" Brooke shrugged. "Not if I tell them it was a science club assignment. They let me saw off my own arm if they thought it would improve my chances of getting into a good college." "My parents would too," Malcolm said, and they all laughed. "They let me saw off both arms if it would get me into the Ivy League." "My mom will be pretty mad," Sam said. Brooke laughed. "Oh, she will, won't she?" I forgot. Forgot what? Chris said. Brooke laughed some more, but managed to get out. Sam's mom is a dentist. After they laughed some more, Malcolm said, That reminds me, Chris. I don't believe you said what your parents do for a living. Chris felt a flutter of panic in his belly. He couldn't possibly tell them that his mom was a cashier, where people paid their electrical bills, and that his dad fixed people's cars. My mom is an electrical engineer, and my dad is a mechanical engineer. Wow, 2 engineers for parents, Sam said. You must be really good at math. Chris nodded. This part, at least, was true. Okay, Mr. Little called. Time to get to work, scientists. Chris was glad that he hadn't revealed to Sam, Malcolm, and Brooke that he was going to perform the experiment without having to pull his own tooth. He couldn't let anybody know that he had figured out a way to game the system.